2, 10. Yeah? Okay. Whoa. Shkoyach. All right. He's unreal. He's becoming a international superstar. Oh, he's fabulous. He's on the New York Times bestseller. Yeah. If everyone read that book, we wouldn't really have any problems. But yeah. I've only read the first chapter, which is long, which is all the stuff I learned in rabbinic school. But it's good, you know. For the people who make the claim that Israel wasn't there first or something, it's insane.
He knocks out genocide, the apartheid, colonialism.
Did you read the whole book?
Yes.
Yeah, I haven't.
Actually, I know the last few pages.
I haven't finished. I've read maybe 100 pages.
Well, a lot of it was what he spoke about.
Yeah.
We all know this, but he lays it out so logically and concisely.
It's hard. Yeah.
He's a judge.
Yeah, it's hard to argue with him.
The lawyer and the judge, everything was organized.
When a rabbi talks, they say, "Well, you're biased." If a rabbi talks, they say, "You're biased."
Right.
Well, I say, "Well, you're right. I'm only interested in one side, the true side. You're interested in the false side, and I'm interested in the true side." That's my bias. But it's an amazing thing if you're a Zionist versus the Palestinian narrative. The facts are almost always on your side. Almost always. But the facts are not interesting to a lot of people, like the New York Times.
Yeah.
But, you know, they're having now an internal split, the New York Times, because there are a lot of people there who are sick of this nonsense. And so I thought we were supposed to be a real newspaper. You know?
It's been a long time since it's a real newspaper.
The New York Times has a history of anti-Zionism going back to 1946.
Not only that, they had a reporter on staff for 40 years who was based in Russia.
Okay.
On the Russia payroll. And the stuff that you heard were always.
It's the cap.
Pretty good crowd. Not too shabby. Okay, so thanks for coming. Good to see you. I appreciate you coming on braving the conditions, you know, and being willing to go out in a slight drizzle. You know, it always cracks me up in the winter time when people go to shul in Buffalo in like 6 feet of snow. But some people won't come here because there's like a slight drizzle. And I always tell them, the ones who did come, you know, of all that our people have been through over the last 4,000 years, you are the ones who've really endured. You know. Okay. So thank you for making your way out in these, you know, despicable conditions. So when I came up with the idea for this class, it was going to be Israel at 79, which is fine. You could talk about Israel at any year. You could talk about Israel at 30. You could talk about Israel at 40. But I was thinking that this Yom HaAtzmaut that we just had was Israel's 79th birthday. It wasn't. It was the 78th. So I was waiting all week or all month for someone to say, why don't you do this year? What are you doing next year for? And then I would have said, well, it's going to be a class on my predictions for what's going to happen. But really, it was just a mistake. Really, it was meant to be Israel at 78. But that's okay. That's okay. Don't get caught up on that. What's the difference? So what I do want to talk about, though, is where Israel stands currently after 78 years. Since 1948, not since Jews started going back to Israel, and how that position has changed in the last, since October 7th. So if we go back, I know someone who taught a class, it was a 3-part class, and he entitled it, the first class was called October 6th, the second class was called October 7th, and the third class was called October 8th. Because never has a country changed so much in 3 days. I mean, maybe some nations have changed that much in 3 days, but this was a big one. And the world is obsessed with it. So I was in D.C. 2 weeks ago. I went for 30 hours, maybe, to lobby for Israel. And as you're walking through the office buildings in D.C., and you go from congressperson to congressperson, almost every single one of them either has a sign that says, I stand with Israel, or it doesn't have that sign. And you would think that walking through the halls of Congress, that this was the only issue going on in the world. Now, unless you go to the South Florida Congress people, where I was, and then you get a lot of Cuban stuff. And then, so there's like, here in South Florida, they care about one other issue. But the rest of the country is obsessed with Israel. And you have to ask yourself, with Israel, with Jews being 2% of the American population and 0.2% of the world population, why is the world so obsessed with Israel? Now you could say because, well, that's where the war is now, and that's true. But this was even before October 7th. That Congress, in and of itself, has become divided over the issue of support for Israel. Not the economy, not Medicare, not education, not crime, Jews. Okay, so we're the only people in the world who don't say all press is good press. We're the opposite. We don't ever want to be in the press, but we always are. And it's like Bill Maher said this week, no Jews, no news. Now, I've come to understand a few things over the last couple of years that I'd like to share with you. You can agree or disagree. If you agree with me, that's great. If you disagree, we're reformed. So you always have the right to be wrong. You can... okay, so I don't care. I don't care if you agree or not. As long as you think I'm funny, what do I care? So that I care about. I put a lot of work into these jokes. All right. So let's point out first what's changed. And maybe I want to be. Maybe I was a little unclear with the title, because when I said Israel, the state of Israel at age 78, I also want to discuss how that correlates to the state of American Judaism, because there's a direct correlation. And the rest of the Jewish world is so small that it's hard to get too worked up about it. Most of us are concerned about Jews in New York, Chicago, LA. I don't know how concerned you are about Jews in Tucson or Tulsa, because there are hardly any there. But that's Europe. You have a lot of Jews in London, you have a lot of Jews in Paris, you have a lot of Jews in Moscow. How many Jews are in Italy? 15,000 total. Total. I mean, they're really small communities. So the whole ball game, to a large extent, if you look at the Jewish world, is Israel and the United States, or say North America. Because of this 16-some million Jews, 15 million of them are in Israel or the United States, and maybe 1 million in the rest of the world combined. So of course we care about them, but the ball game is being played in America and in Israel in terms of major Jewish communities. I'm not saying they're not important. We have a nice community in Argentina, we have a nice community in Brazil. Okay, fine. But the ball game is being played here and in Israel. So on October 6th, if you had gone to a briefing with Israeli generals, and I've been through 1 million of them, they would have told you that it's not if there's going to be a war, it's when there's going to be a war. And that war is going to be devastating to Israel because Hezbollah has 150,000 ballistic missiles. And once they start firing them on Israel, there'll really be no way to stop them. I mean, we'll stop a lot of them, but if you stop 95% of them and 5% hit, that's devastating to Israel. And Netanyahu used to go up to the Kiryah. You know what the Kiryah is? It's a big building in Tel Aviv that's like Israel's Pentagon. And he would go up to the top floor and he would take visitors and he would say, you see the Israeli skyline here, the Tel Aviv skyline along the ocean? Someday all this is going to be gone because Hezbollah is going to wipe it out. And we're going to have that war. And we're going to have tremendous casualties. And we're going to lose our whole skyline of Tel Aviv and God knows what else. And that's what they thought was going to happen. And I had a Israeli general tell our group, that if we attack first, we have a 75% chance of winning a war against Iran, and if they attack first, we have a 50% chance of winning. And I walked out of there thinking that Israel, at any given moment, has a 50% chance of being destroyed, which is the definition of an existential threat. That's where we were on October 6th. And it was terrifying. And all the while that was happening, while Hezbollah was just sitting there waiting to pounce on the northern border, and while Hamas was arming in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, and while Assad was sitting there in Syria helping Iran bring the weapons all the livelong day to Hezbollah in Lebanon, Israel was getting ready and had an internal debate within them. And there was a real clear debate between the Naftali Bennett camp and the Netanyahu camp. And it was called the octopus debate. Do you attack the head of the octopus first, meaning Iran? Or do you attack the tentacles first, meaning Lebanon, Hamas, Syria, the Houthis, and so forth? And that was the debate between them. And yeah, who knows? So on October 7th, the plan always was, and it wasn't so clear at the time. It wasn't clear what China's role was. It wasn't clear what Russia's role was. It was weird that October 7th is Putin's birthday. Yeah. I thought that was strange, and I thought maybe that was a sign of some sort. Turns out I don't think it was, but it was weird. And on October 7th, had Hezbollah coordinated with Hamas and attacked on the northern border, there would have been a real question whether Israel could have survived. But what happened was Yahya Sinwar, the head of Hamas, jumped the gun. It's a miracle that he jumped the gun. Because if he would have coordinated better with Hezbollah, and Hezbollah would attack from the north, they might have killed everybody before Israel could have even knew what was going on, which is unheard of when you think of the Israeli army and Israeli intelligence, but that's what happened. And only after the war did Israel find out how extensive the tunnels were in the north and how deep Hezbollah had dug into. And even though people in places like Metula, right on the border, were saying, we hear them under there digging. We know they're doing that. Israel couldn't have imagined how sophisticated it was, and even how sophisticated it was in Gaza. And so for all these years in the past, Hamas would bomb Israel, and Israel would bomb back. And both sides were a win for Hamas. Hamas would bomb Israel to terrorize Israelis. Then they would go hide underground for a month. Israel would bomb back and kill the people on top who they didn't let underground, meaning civilians. It was a double win for Hamas. One, we bombed you, and two, you killed our civilians, so now you look terrible. And the one thing that Hamas has over Israel is they don't care about their civilians. In fact, they like when their civilians are killed because it makes them look better, because it makes Israel look bad. And year after year, this was the vicious cycle. They would bomb Israel, Israel would bomb back, Hamas would go and hide, you'd never kill any of the Hamas guys, you'd only kill civilians or whatever you hit, and Israel would look terrible. And there was no solution for it. And this would have continued and continued and continued, with Hamas having all of the advantages and Israel having no way to do anything except by bringing a ground invasion, which nobody wanted, and wouldn't solve the problem anyway. The couple times they did have ground invasions, all they did was set Hamas back a month or two, but didn't really have any effect. Now, in the meantime, Israel didn't realize that Hamas's only other border was with Egypt. Well, Egypt was supposed to be guarding the border. And guarding the border meant not letting weapons smuggled into Gaza. Now, the head of Egypt said, what do I care if they smuggle weapons into Gaza? Because every time they send up the missiles, Israel has Iron Dome now. Israel's not as concerned about the missiles from Hamas as they used to be because Iron Dome is like 99% effective. And if I send in guns, who cares? If I allow guns smuggled in, who cares? What are they going to do? Shoot across the border? The Israeli army's there. Hamas could never break through the border and attack Israel, so who cares how many guns they have? And then on October 7th, when they did break through with all those guns, and nobody could believe how many guns they had, and how many bullets and weapons and everything, al-Sisi said, the president of Egypt said, "Oy." Now, why did he let them smuggle all that stuff in? What does he care? Because his family controls the border, and he became a billionaire over this. Meanwhile, Bibi is corrupt and should be thrown in jail because he got a bottle of cigars and a bottle of champagne. A box of cigars and a bottle of champagne. He's worth like $11 million. Al-Sisi became a billionaire, smuggling in more weapons than most European countries have. Abbas is worth about $30 billion in a 21st year of a 4-year term. But Bibi took a cigar, so throw him in jail. I mean, it is just, all right, don't take the cigars if it's against the rules, but give me a break. The corruption in the world that surrounds Israel is on an Olympic scale. I mean, you can't even comprehend the corruption. So now, October 7th in a couple of ways, in and of itself, was a victory for Israel. Now, it was a terrible tragedy. It's a tragedy we'll mourn for the rest of our lives. But about 1,600 Israelis died. The estimates that Israeli generals thought would happen in a war with Iran was in the hundreds of thousands. So what did October 7th allow Israel to do that they couldn't do on October 6th? They could go into Gaza with everything they had, wipe out the tunnels and wipe out Hamas and degrade Hamas completely, which they did. The only problem with that, and the only reason why it took so long and was so expensive, or so painful, was because of the hostages. The hostages changed everything. And I actually had a meeting with Michael Oren. You know Michael Oren? There was a meeting in Denver, Colorado of JNF, and there was a rabbinic group that got to meet with him. And he came in, this wasn't long after October 7th, and Michael Oren said, you know, Bibi had a choice. Yeah, whether you love Bibi or hate Bibi, I couldn't care less what you think of him, but this is what Michael Oren said happened. After October 7th, we knew that there were 251 hostages, Israeli, Thai, whatever, hostages from Israel who were taken into Gaza. And Bibi could have said, we just lost 1,200 people. We're going to lose 250 more, 251 more in the next couple of weeks. But we're going to bomb all the tunnels, we're going to poison all the tunnels, we're going to smoke out Hamas, and we're going to kill them all. We're going to flood the tunnels, all that stuff. He could have said that. But Jews don't do that. Now, more people subsequently probably died fighting, but Jews don't do that. Why don't Jews do that? If I would have told you 251 hostages are going to die tomorrow, but you're going to save 500 soldiers over the next year. You knew that. As an Israeli, you'd still have to say, Jews don't do that. Now, why don't they do that? Because from 1948 on, Israel made a promise. The government of Israel made a promise to the Jewish world. And that promise was that Israel, the point of Israel, is that Israel is the one place in the world that you can go where you'll be safe as a Jew. And if anyone tries to hurt you, we will always protect you. We will always look for you. That was the promise of Israel. So to have allowed the hostages to die for a quick victory in Gaza goes against the sacred mission of what Israel was founded on. It's an ethical dilemma. Because maybe this is the ethical dilemma we played with Gilad Shalit. What country in the world would free 1,000 hardened terrorists for one soldier? America would, in their wildest dreams, wouldn't consider it. There are American hostages all over the world. Nobody even knows who they are. I mean, maybe you know Paul Whelan, because he was part of the Britney's, whatever her name was, the basketball player. Brittany Griner. So maybe you know, but there are American hostages in China, there are American hostages in Russia, there are American hostages in Venezuela, all these terrible places that are holding Americans wrongly detained. You think any American would say, all right, listen, we got this guy in Venezuela, take out 1,000 of our worst people, and don't send them to Venezuela. Send them to the border of Texas. What? Because that was what happened. We didn't send these 1,200 hardened terrorists to Antarctica. We sent them to Gaza, which is this close to Tel Aviv. Nobody would do that. But Israel was founded on the promise that we get our people back. You know how many secret missions there were into Lebanon, into Syria, to try to find Ron Arad, the Israeli pilot who was, we never found him. But so many missions to try to find him year after year. Everyone in Israel knew his name. You could walk around Tel Aviv and say, name the hostages. And any Israeli there could probably tell you 150 or 180 of the names of the 250 hostages. Walk around Brickell and ask someone name 5 American hostages anywhere in the world. No chance. No chance. So it's a different way of looking at the world. So now October 7th happens, and the death toll is far less than whatever would have been imagined. Now, 2 things happened. One is Israel went into Gaza. Israel declared full war on Gaza. And what Netanyahu said on October 7th was, this isn't an incursion. This isn't an operation. This is full-scale war. If you do October 7th, this is full-scale war. Israel had never attacked Gaza with that kind of firepower before. And even Hamas said, had we known that Israel would have attacked like this, we wouldn't have done it. Not sure what they expected, but they said, the price they've paid wasn't worth what they got out of it. Although most of the people who said that are now dead. So they certainly feel that way. But the other thing that happened was Hezbollah realized that it didn't have the go-ahead from Iran to attack when Hamas did, and they missed their moment. And when they missed their moment, that gave Joe Biden a few moments to send in air carriers, which he did. And you have to give him credit for that. I don't give him credit for a lot of other things the rest of the war, but on that I do. So he sent in the air carriers, and it was effective in stopping Hezbollah for sending over ground troops. However, when Joe Biden said, don't, remember that? Don't, they did. And all of Israel in the north had to evacuate. Can you imagine if everybody in New England had to move to the mid-Atlantic and live in hotels in people's homes because it wasn't safe to live in Vermont or Maine or Massachusetts because Canada was bombing them nonstop? What would we do to Canada? There wouldn't be a Canada. But that's what was happening. And I would go to places like the Negev. My first trip to Israel after October 7th, we stayed at a hotel in the Negev. And it just happened to be Purim. And the whole hotel was filled with kids dressed up in Purim costumes. Who were they? Kids who lived in the Golan Heights. They lived in that hotel. Now, it was a very nice hotel. But even after 4 days, I was like, get me out of here. And they were living, 2 parents, 3 kids, a dog, in one hotel room. Now, the breakfasts were killer. I mean, you would eat the breakfast at this hotel and you'd say, I would almost consider it. But then you go back to your room and, there's, a dog and 3 cats in 100 square feet and you say, this is ridiculous. But that's what happened. However, now what happened? Hezbollah came further to the border. And the issue was that they were so close to the border beyond this area called the Litani River, where there's this little river. I mean, you could jump over it. It's not exactly the Mississippi, but there's this Litani River there. And if you go far enough over it, and you go high enough, you can shoot anti-tank missiles into Israel that Iron Dome can't get. So Hamas didn't have that. And Hamas could only send the missiles up that Iron Dome could take out pretty much every time. Same thing with Iran, same thing with everybody. Iron Dome gets almost all of them. Not all of them, but almost all of them. But the anti-tank missiles from on top of the other side of the Litani River were indefensible, and Israel had to evacuate the north. However, because of the world community, and because of the way Israel regrouped, and because Iran wasn't able to, coordinate with Hezbollah, there was no ability for Hezbollah to take over the north. All they could do was make Israel's life miserable, but they couldn't take over the land. That's October 7th. Now we come to October 8th. I don't mean the day October 8th, I mean the period in the aftermath. The battle against Hamas in Gaza was one of the most heroic efforts by any army in military history. The fact that 67,000 Palestinians were killed in the war, according to Al Jazeera and Hamas's own numbers. 50,000 of them, 50,000 of those families are being paid funds by Hamas for the loss of their martyr. Which means that 50,000 of the 67,000 of them were terrorists. And 17,000 were civilian. Now, who were those civilians? The majority were family of the terrorists. Now, I want to tell you something that really happened to me. The last time I was in Israel, well, 2 times ago when I was in Israel, I was on an army base called Palmachim. I may have told some of you this story, but it's a good story, so it's worth hearing twice. So Palmachim is a large army base. It's like as big as Pinecrest. It's massive. And one of the things they do there is they operate the drones. And they have these rooms, well, like trailers, and they were Sharon was with me. And they took Sharon and I into a trailer to see where they operate. It looks like a video game screen. Screens and buttons, and this is where they operate the drones. So I thought we were just going to walk in there, and I'm asking questions. We walk in, and there's soldiers actively operating drones, sitting there. And so I walk in, I'm like, oh, well, what does this button do? And they're like, the commander who was with us, like, shut up, you can't talk in here. I didn't know it was an active war scene. I thought you were just showing us a trailer. So we walk in and tell her, you can't speak here. We stood there for 45 minutes, just watching the soldiers. They all had these big ear things, and they were communicating with lots of people, and every once in a while, one of them would push a button or it got really boring. It was amazing for like 5 minutes, because what you could see on the screens was a terrorist in a building, and they were monitoring him. And Sharon's like, can you believe this? So Sharon and I, we just couldn't believe they were showing us this stuff. And, of course, they said, don't tell anybody about this, so immediately come back and tell you guys. But what they mean by that is don't write about it, online or in the newspaper or anything. So after 45 minutes, I'm bored out, I'm bored out of my mind. I have ADD, I'm bored, doing anything. So then we hear, all of a sudden in Hebrew, a countdown from 10. 10, 9, 8, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, shager. Right? Shager means fire. And then you hear like a noise. And then you see on the screen that terrorist who was walking around. It was all like infrared, like it wasn't a picture of a person, but you could see like the heat movements of an individual. And I was just like, what in the world was that? Like, I cannot believe they let us see this. So we walk out, and the commander said, those soldiers who were sitting there have been sitting there for 6 hours. 6 hours. They were waiting for him. They were waiting to be certain that he was alone. And there were soldiers in Gaza who had eyes on him and who had eyes on the building, and they knew, and they waited for the moment where there was no one else in the building, and then they killed him. They waited 6 hours. Any other army in the world would have said, you know what, if we lose one of his kids, we lose one of his kids. Just not going to. Israelis don't do that. So were there 17,000 cases where there was a mistake made? Or they thought that a room was empty and it wasn't? Probably. Or were there cases where they told Hamas, people, we're going to bomb this building, don't be in it, and the civilians went to leave and Hamas told them you're not allowed to leave that building, and then the building got blown up? Many times. Many times Israel said, we're blowing up this building. We know that you're storing weapons there. We know it's this, that, or the other thing. We're going to blow it up tomorrow at noon. Don't be in there. And the people went to leave. And Hamas had stolen their cars, stolen their keys, locked them in the building, and they died. Now, Israel didn't know that Hamas was doing that. They only found that out later. But that's how most of the civilians died. So now you look at it and you say, okay, 17,000 people died. Most of them died in that way. This was a long war over a couple of years, the most intense urban combat war ever fought anywhere, because Gaza is one of the most densely populated areas on the globe. And fewer people died, fewer civilian combatants died in this war than in any other war in urban combat history. That's what Israel accomplished. That's the genocide. That's why someone like Roy Altman can write a book saying, what are you talking about? That's not what happened. Here's what happened. So by defanging Hamas, then you had at the same time, all of a sudden, Hezbollah having the time of their life, bombing Israel mercilessly, seeing Israel at its ultimate weakest. One day, their beepers buzz, and they're gone. And anyone in Hezbollah who knew anything about where the rockets are or how to fire them is now either blind, or if their phones were in their pockets, are now have different pronouns. Let's put it gently. Okay, I just came up with that. And that was it. And then they killed Nasrallah. And one by one, they started killing the Hamas leaders. And these guys they've been tracking for years, decades, haven't been able to. One by one, they start getting them. And the Hezbollah beeper thing was a huge turning point, because they no longer had the will to fight, and Israel was able to push them back beyond the Litani River to a place where they could no longer fire ballistic missiles at Israel that Israel couldn't get with Iron Dome. At the same time, Israel came out with Iron Beam. Iron Beam is a collaboration with Jim Beam, the whisk. No, all right. This is the only thing Marjorie Trader Green has ever been right about. She said Israel had lasers. And everyone said she's crazy, the Jewish space lasers. No, Israel, they do have them. They have Iron Beam, and they put it into action, and it's been working. And every Iron Dome shot that goes up costs $120,000. $120,000. That's mostly what Americans are paying for, because those are extremely expensive. And Israel needs tremendous support from America to buy those. That's where a lot of the American funding went to. You know where most of the rest of the American dollars went to during the war? Airplane parts. Because Israel, with all the sorties they were flying, they don't have the factories that could build the airplane parts. And here's a misnomer. And as much as Bibi is trying to say, if you watch the 60 Minutes, that Israel's trying to wean itself off of American aid. We could, maybe. But Israel would have a very tough time fighting a prolonged war without America, because Israel doesn't have the capacity to build all of the factories and all the different things that you need to fight a war of this length, at this level. And they rely on America to do that. And who else are you going to rely on? Germany? France? Australia? I mean, who are you going to rely on? It has to be here. That's why That's why I keep schlepping back and forth to D.C. We have to keep support of Israel bipartisan, or else we're in serious trouble. And right now it's teetering. Tonight's a big night. Tonight's a primary in Kentucky. And the worst, most anti-Semitic congressman in the Republican Party is running in Kentucky, Thomas Massie. And Trump is supporting the other guy, who's a Navy SEAL. And we are supporting the other guy. He could be a Navy SEAL. He could be an actual SEAL. We would support him against Massie, because Massie is as anti-Semitic as they come, as anti-Israel as they come. And here's what's going to happen. You see this trend now where people are saying, I won't take AIPAC money. Right? Gavin Newsom said it. Lots of other congressmen are saying it. And what they're saying is, supporting Israel is political kryptonite. That's the feeling of a lot of Democrats these days. The only Republican who feels that way is Thomas Massie and Rand Paul. We got to get rid of them. But all the others, they don't see it that way. By the way, there are a lot of Democrats who are still with us, but there are a lot who are not. There's only one way to change that. Not crying about anti-Semitism, none of that. Not begging them to vote with us. The only way to change that is to win elections. Is to show them that being against Israel is bad politics. And if we beat Massie tonight, that would be a big step in that direction. And we have to continue to support Democrats who support Israel. So, for example, there's a huge race going on in Michigan. Haley Stevens. Haley Stevens is running against a guy in Michigan named Abdul Al-Fayyad. Take my word for it, he's not a Zionist. So Abdul Al-Fayyad is more vicious in his Israel views than Mamdani, by far. And should he win, it could tilt the Senate in an anti-Israel favor. So if you have extra money, go on AIPAC and support this. What AIPAC does is it has a portal. You go to AIPAC and then you go on there and you pick the candidate that you want. So you want to give money to Chuck Schumer, you go on there. I know Harvey's a big supporter of Chuck. Leading the campaign. Just kidding. But if you wanted to give money to him, you go on AIPAC, you click Chuck Schumer, and the money that you donate goes to him. But Haley Stevens she's not Jewish. She's a Democratic congresswoman running for Senate in Michigan, who's big-time pro-Israel, and if she loses to Al-Fayyad, we're in trouble. We still have another chance because Rogers is the Republican who's running against her, but his polls aren't that great. So it's very scary. But the only way, these politicians, all they care about is winning. That's it. So the only way to show them that being anti-Israel is bad politics is to beat them. And that's why these elections are so important, more so on the Democratic side, because they're buying into that Israel is kryptonite type stuff. I'm going to get back to that in a second, but let's go back to October 7th and October 8th. Well, we finished October 7th, on to October 8th. Look what just happened. On October 6th, we said, if Israel goes to war, it has a 50% chance of losing, and even if we win, it'll cost so much that we'll lose the skyline of Tel Aviv. There'll be hundreds of thousands of casualties. Comes October 8th, and that period after, Hamas is defanged. Hezbollah is pushed back beyond the Litani River. And then, after the beeper thing, because of the beeper thing, the rebels in Syria realized, now's our chance. If we go and kick out Assad, the only reason we haven't done that before, because we hate Assad, the only reason we haven't done that is because Hezbollah will come to his aid. But they jumped right away and said, they're not able to do it now. They're still looking for their body parts in the shuk. Let's go. and like lightning, they took out Assad. And so overnight, you look at a redrawn map. Instead of having threats everywhere, Israel has threats almost nowhere, except Iran. And that's all Iran has left. Enters Donald Trump, begin the war, and that's where we are now. But the existential threats, other than the uranium that Iran still has. So what would be a victory in Iran? Look, Trump, I think, was bullied into the war, not by Bibi. That's nonsense. By the Iranian people. Because the Iranian people really did revolt. They really did rise up. And they really did say, you in America, you in Jerusalem, you want a new regime in Iran. We've been afraid to do it. But we're doing it. And then Iran killed 40,000 of them. So how can Trump stand there and say, if they're willing to die for this, how could I not help? I don't know if that's true. But I think it's part of it. I can't say, I've never been in the Oval Office while they were discussing it. But it seemed like that's what happened. And it seemed like Trump said, this is our chance. Now, there are two problems. One, we haven't gotten the enriched uranium out. And two, we haven't ended the war properly to give the Iranians a chance to go and overthrow the government. I mean, we've taken out a lot of the regime, including the Ayatollah and a lot of his people, but who knows what will happen when the war ends? Are the Iranian people going to have the will to rise up again? Now, I would imagine that the CIA and that the Mossad are on the ground in Iran coordinating such a revolt. I would imagine that. But I also imagine that October 7th could never happen. So who knows? I do know that if you go to the brand new Kempinski Hotel in Tel Aviv and you try to get on the second floor, you won't be able to because the whole floor is taken up by the CIA. And they've been there since October 7th. They have the whole floor. There's a scene about that in my new book, which is forthcoming. Hopefully I'll have it done by the end of the summer. So you got that to look forward to. My next poor investment. You know, I had in my contract that if I ever did write anything, I get to keep the royalties, that it's my property if I ever published anything. But if I could redo that, I would have had it written that any losses that I occurred on my books, the temple has to cover. Because there weren't royalties, there were... Okay. So, you know, when the next one comes out, if you want to buy 10 or 11 copies, it won't kill you. You know, make great stocking Hanukkah stuffers. All right, paperweights, whatever. So now we look at Israel, and we say, and this is sort of the main point that I'll conclude with, and then, you know, maybe I'll say a word about America. But on October 6th, Israel was a regional superpower with existential threats that couldn't guarantee its survival without America. That's October 6th. October 7th was a glimpse of what that destruction could look like. And the thing to remember about October 7th is October 7th didn't open up the wounds of the Yom Kippur War or the 1948 war or the 1967 war. October 7th opened up the wounds of the Holocaust. That's how despicable. I mean, it was beyond what you could ever imagine. And so it changed everything. But the October 8th Israel is an Israel that's not a regional superpower. It's an international superpower that's too big to fail. Elon Musk said yesterday Israel's the #1 country in innovation in the world. Israel's a nuclear superpower that doesn't even need its nuclear weapons when existential threats are forcing it. Israel came up with a new doctrine. Never again will we allow a ring of fire. Never again will we allow Hezbollah to cross the Litani River or Hamas to gang up on our borders. We'll wipe you out. And so just not allowing Iran's Ring of Fire to work elevates Israel. Iran spent $1 trillion on the Ring of Fire and got nothing for it, except October 7th. When they spent $1 trillion on the Ring of Fire, they imagined the destruction of Israel. They didn't get 1 inch of Israel. It was a complete and total failure. Not only that, they incurred the wrath of Donald Trump and Raising Cain. You know that guy? And Hegseth. Right. So that's not a good wrath to incur. And they've suffered tremendously. Their entire leadership has been wiped out. Okay, so Israel started as a regional superpower that may not even make it and emerged stronger than it's ever been in its history. And I'll give you one telling point how you know that. I'm not talking about the war with Trump, but the first war between Israel and Iran, the 12-day war. Iran went to Russia and China and said, help. And what did Russia and China say? I would end this war if I were you because you don't look like you're doing very well, and we're not coming. That was incredible. Now, one of the things that I'll end with this, and then maybe take any questions. If you look at what just happened in China with Trump and Xi, there's a lot of discussion about Iran and what to do with Israel and Iran. Now, why is China continuing to arm Iran? Why to help them rebuild their ballistic missile program? Why does it help them with technology? Why did it help them with information on where the intelligence on where the American fighters were and their bases and all that stuff? Because they get 90% of their oil from Iran. Now, so they need to prop up Iran. Russia too. Not to the same extent, but Russia as well. Now here's the problem. If China is going to make any concessions on Iran for the sake of America, which they're not going to do anyway because, we're about to have midterms and Trump may get weakened, why would they? But even if they were, what would they want in return? Concessions on Taiwan. So America, in order to get what it wants in Iran, would have to sell out Taiwan. And you might say, well, who cares about Taiwan? But that's where all the semiconductors are. And if you make concessions on Taiwan, then China controls the semiconductor market. And now we're at China's mercy on everything. To which case you realize, of course, Israel's not a superpower because there only are 2 superpowers, America and China. And everyone else is just playing an act in their game. Even Russia. Russia can't even win a war against Ukraine. Even Russia. We're all pawns. However, we're pawns that are too big to fail. There's some that are too big to fail, and there's some that aren't. And, if Togo goes out of business tomorrow, nobody's going to, nothing against Togo, maybe it's beautiful, I don't know. But who's going to care? But Israel's got a lot riding on it. And Israel is the only democracy in the Middle East. And one last point, and this is a major point. Right before Rosh Hashanah, when the UN was getting together for one of their anti-Semitic conferences that they call the General Assembly, you saw a bunch of countries starting to say, we're going to recognize a Palestinian state unilaterally. France, Spain, Ireland, Slovenia, England, even Australia got into it. What happened to that? Why didn't they do it? They were so excited about it. One reason. When England did it, Israel said, we've had enough. So the Mossad sent an email to MI5. You know James Bond? I don't know if he was there that day, but whoever was on, was on the computers that day, they sent an email, had 2 words. It said, game over. What did that mean? We will no longer share intelligence with you. Done. recognizing the Palestinians, saying, you know, they're done. So what happened? The head of MI5 and the head of the army in England went right over to 10 Downing Street, told the prime minister, you're going to get us all killed. We cannot exist as a country without intelligence on Islamic fundamentalism from Israel. Our entire country will blow up if we don't have their information. And there was a huge screaming match at 10 Downing Street. And what resulted from that? Maybe we're not going to recognize Palestine. And then they made a call to France, and a call to Ireland, and a call to Australia, and that was that. Because Israel's too big to fail. So think about where we came from October 6th to today. And all the while, while Israel has been beaten down, attacked with nuclear ballistic missiles from 7 different places, while anti-Semitism has run rapid all over the world, while social media is another front, all the while, Israel's economy is booming. Israel is ranked in the top 10 happiest countries in the world. And Israel is safer now, and so are the Jewish people, than we've ever been in our history. So I would say that by the 79th birthday next year, not only is Israel in a better place than it was since October 7th, but the Jewish people at this moment are the strongest we've ever been in human history at this moment. Never have we had such an army with such friends and such support. So let me end with this idea. Because you might say, that's fine. But what about Jews here in America? Things here are going terribly. There's a fair bit of truth to that. But here's what I would say. I don't think that anti-Semitism is as widespread as social media makes it look. Social media is a terrible, terrible problem. And it's infected young people. And if you look at all the polls on anti-Semitism, most of the hatred for Jews, Judaism, or Israel is in the 20 to 40 age range. Because they don't know how to read books, or they just look at TikTok all day long. And, I was in Europe on the March of the Living a couple weeks ago, and had the misfortune to catch some news on the BBC and Al Jazeera in English. If I lived in Europe and watched those news outlets, I would hate Israel. It was like produced by Dr. Goebbels. It was unbelievable propaganda, utter nonsense. But that's what they're consuming. And that's what TikTok tried to bring here. And there are other news outlets that are trying to bring it here as well. But the truth is, sitting around and begging people not to be anti-Semitic is a loser. Does nothing. And most of the people who don't like us, a lot of them are minorities. And a lot of them look at us and say, oh, anti-Semitism is a real problem. When I drive by your house in Pinecrest, I feel terrible for you. When I drive out to Hialeah and almost get shot going to work, I think about, oh my God, someone put out a leaflet that said I don't like Jews. I just feel terrible for them. They don't care. Now, is it a true stereotype that we're all rich and powerful? Of course not. But they don't care. They have their own problems that they care about. And sitting around and begging them, now, there are partnerships that we have to make, and we're doing them. But sitting around and crying about it is nothing. Doesn't do anything. So I think, and I'm a proponent of a more Bret Stephens type approach, which is if they don't let us sit at their table, then we'll build our own table. But our table will be better. And we'll do it with grace. And when they want to come sit at our table, we'll say, you're more than welcome. And they'll want to sit at our table. And when they don't want our kids at Harvard anymore, so we send them to Duke and Vanderbilt, then eventually they're going to say, wait a minute, why are all the Nobel Prizes coming out of Duke and Vanderbilt? Oh yeah, Goldberg, we didn't want him. We better get his brother. And they'll start pulling us back because they'll, just like in the 50s, they'll say, we don't want Jews, but they're such good students. We need them. And so they may hate us, fine. But they'll respect us, and they'll appreciate us. And all the while, we do it with grace. And we have to lean in, I think, to what we represent. Because there's no such, I don't think anti-Semitism is a thing. Well, of course it's a thing. I don't think hating Jews is a thing. Most of the people who hate Jews don't know any. Or if they do, I hate Jews. Really? Do you know all 16 million of them? Now, if someone says, I hate you because I've gotten to know you, that I understand. I don't blame you. You know, get to know these people too. Yeah, then I understand it. But you don't even know us and you hate us. I always say this about Bibi. Why do you hate Bibi? You shouldn't hate Bibi unless you know him. If you know him, then you know, he's a narcissist, he's crazy, he's a snake, okay. But if you've never met him, what do you hate? So, okay, forget him for a second. They don't hate us as people. They don't even know us as people. They hate what we stand for. But what do we stand for? So this came out the other day. I was talking to someone, and he said, he wanted to know about heaven. And he said, do Jews and non-Jews go to the same heaven? I said, yeah, but we have 613 mitzvah that we have to follow, and they have 7. And he said, we're the chosen people. So I asked him, yeah, but chosen for what? He said, well, we have 613 mitzvahs, and they have 7. He said, well, we know about the 613 mitzvahs because God gave us the Torah, and we read the Torah. But how are they supposed to know about the 7? Which are basically a watered-down 10 commandments. I mean, they don't have to keep Shabbos, but basically how do they know about the 7? I said, that's what we've been chosen for. We've been chosen to teach them to live a moral life. So being Jewish means you stand for being a model of what it means to have a relationship with God so that you can live an ethical and moral life in this world. That's what we represent. People will always hate ethics and morality. So when they say they're anti-Semitic, it's not that they're saying they hate Jews. They hate what we stand for. I'm okay with that. You want to say you hate me? You don't even know me. Yeah, but I hate what you stand for. Right, I see, you're immoral. I get that. There's always going to be immorality. So what we need to just do is forget about it and keep leaning into what we do. So if I put out a menorah and someone draws a swastika on it, the next day you'll see 10 menorahs. So I might get 10 swastikas. Well, the next day you'll see 1,000 menorahs. Or 2,000, whatever. But the more you hate us for being Jewish, the better Jews we're going to be. Because being a better Jew means modeling morality. Now, we still have to make connections. There's no question. We still have to mend fences. There's a lot we need to do. But sitting around and crying about people don't like us, that's not so helpful. Okay, you can take that or leave that, but that's just sort of my last view. But hopefully now you have a general understanding of where I think we are from October 6th until now when Israel's 78. Okay, Jay.
Okay, so I think it's pretty clear that the United States is not going to put boots on the ground in order to get to that uranium.
Yeah.
So what is your feeling on Bibi or Israel making that mission happen? Because or else it's going to be there.
Well,
It might be uncoverable right now.
Bibi said on the 60 Minutes interview, they asked him, I don't understand, how are you going to get the uranium? And he said, well, we're going to have to go in and get it. But do you know that Israel stole the entire archive of information about about Iran's nuclear program? Do you remember that? It was a few years ago. They can go in and act in Iran whenever they want. They have it down to a science. At most meetings of the Iranian top officials, they look around to see who's with Mossad. Because half the group is, they're going to be able, I think, to go and get it. The problem is, how far down is it how far down underground is it buried? And how do you do that? But if anyone could figure it out, it's the Israelis. So I think in order to win the war, you have to get that uranium. That's the only way to actually say that the war has been won. And I don't know if it's possible. But if it is, they're going to do it. America may help. Yeah, who knows? Other nations may help. So the Saudis may help. Who knows?
The biggest problem is we don't know who's in charge in Iran.
Well,
That's one problem. And then in the United States, Pahlavi keeps making statements that he thinks he's going to be in charge. The
Who?
Shah's son, Pahlavi.
oh, Pahlavi, yeah.
So, and I don't think the people in Iran want another Pahlavi government.
Yeah, I don't know.
You've got a problem with the people.
It's hard to tell because there's no internet there. So there's no way to communicate with them. So, I mean, here's the question. When the war's over, will the Iranian people revolt or not? Because one of the things you're going to have, one of the strategies of the war is to make it so that when the war is over, their economy is so dysfunctional that nobody has anything. Because if they're all making a fine living, nobody's going to revolt. They're only going to revolt really on economic despair. So if you've crushed all of the industries to the point where nobody can make a living, then you've opened up a better chance for revolt. So I think that's the strategy. But who knows? Other questions? Yeah, I have no idea. It has not worked so far. It has not worked so far. And what's amazing is, I once had an Iranian say to me, an Iranian expatriate. He said, I said, why don't you guys revolt? Come on. He said, because this government won't hesitate to just kill everybody. And I said, I know they'll kill a few. Well, then it happened. And they killed 40,000 people in a few days. So who wants to go revolt again? It's a death sentence. But, if the Mossad and the CIA are on the ground and they're able to overthrow a city here and overthrow a city here, who knows? But I'll give it to the Iranians. May they burn in hell. This regime. I'll give it to the Iranian regime. They don't give up. They look at it in terms of like the Chinese. They look at it in increments of 1,000 years. We look at it as in increments from now to the midterms. They're looking 1,000 years ahead, and they'll say, okay, Trump's going to bombard us, this, that, and the other thing, but he'll be gone soon, and then we'll be back to business as usual. So who knows? I don't know what's going to happen. Okay, other comments, questions? No? If not, that's good. All right, thank you all. Appreciate it.